Hello again, and welcome to the fourth installment in this series on modding my aging X-Blade PC case. In this segment we'll be looking at how I've managed to install a Silverstone FP-32 I kit into this case. Now, under normal conditions I wouldn't consider installing this a mod, but because my hard drive cage was now taking up most of the space required for this device, I had to take out the old Dremel and cutting disc to make it fit. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, you've missed the first video in this series, X-Blade Airflow Improvement. Check it out if you haven't. Okay, let's get started. This is the Silverstone FP-32. It's a multi-IO port device that will normally fit into any vacant 3.5 drive bays. It gives you 4 additional USB ports, a FireWire port, as well as headphone and mic jacks in both AC97 and HD audio standards, also known as Azalea. It's a great little device if you need these additional ports, obviously, and it places them conveniently at the front of your case as opposed to the back. Now, this thing measures the same as a floppy disk drive. I see no apparent reason as to why that is, but in any case, I couldn't fit it into the floppy bay because not only is my drive cage taking up most of that space, but the L bracket that supports the left side of the panel my flow meter is mounted to is also obstructing the way. So here's what I did to get around that. I cut the back end all the way down to about 1 inch in depth. I then had to cut a groove along the left side as shown here. This groove provided clearance for the L bracket that holds the aluminum panel on which the flow meter is attached. In addition, I had to cut away a portion of the right side wall of the unit as shown here. This, as you will see, is to allow clearance for the rear end of one of my hard drives. As for mounting the unit, it simply became too difficult to drill holes for screws. So to secure the device in place, I used trusty old 3M heavy-duty mounting tape. This stuff is awesome, and this thing ain't going anywhere. Next up are 2 water cooling related mods. The first one will take us to the back of the case, to the reservoir. This here is the Danger Den Fillport reservoir. It comes standard with 1 hole only, located at the bottom, and is intended to be used in a T-line configuration. Being restricted by space and also because my radiator sits outside of my case, I could not use it in that way. I instead converted it to a conventional reservoir with an inlet and outlet. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. Why didn't you just use a regular reservoir? Because I already had this one, and with a ready-to-use reservoir, I don't get to drill a hole into something. Duh. So, using an 11.8mm drill bit, followed by 1/4 inch British standard thread tap, I added a secondary hole right here. Can't get those metric tools locally? Once again, McMastercard delivers. For those interested, here are the product numbers. This combination of bit and tap makes a standard threaded 1/4 inch BSP hole. To mount the reservoir in place, I made this circular bracket using the spare metal I cut off the Silverstone FB32 device. The bracket is secured by 2 screws here. The thread portion of the Fillport slips through the bracket and screws tightly into the reservoir, thus securing it in place. I also drilled a hole through the chassis here to allow the fitting and hose to go through. The second water cooling mod takes us inside the case to the water pump, the Swiftech MCP655. Now, anybody who's familiar with this pump knows that you can't fit 3/8 inch tubing on it because the ports are really fat and designed for a 1/2 inch hose. But if your entire loop runs on 3/8 inch, what do? Well, you can use these Pvc Reducers, which are just silly because by the time you've hooked them up to your pump, you've added almost 3 inches to both the inlet and outlet. Not a good idea if your space is restricted. Or you can buy an aftermarket pump top like this one, but this will run you an extra 40 to 50 bucks. What I did was way simpler. I removed the top of the pump and using my 1/4 BSP tap, I threaded both the inlet and outlet about 3/8 in depth. No need to use the 11.8mm drill bit prior to tapping. Just go slow and steady with the tap. This allowed me to connect standard G 1/4 fittings to my pump. Really, Swiftech should start doing this to make their pumps G1/4 friendly. Not everybody wants to run 1/2-inch loops. Anyway, this concludes the 3rd installment in this video series. Tune in for the 4th and last segment, where we'll be looking at some tricky modding I've performed on the Primal Chill Quad 120mm radiator that closed the loop in my X-Blade case. I'll also show you some recent changes I've made to this build since the first video was made. Feel free to post your comments and questions about this video. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.